Welcome, football fanatics, to the First and 10 Club. I'm your host, Mark D, and week 6 is a wrap. We're not waiting on any more COVID games. We can put week 6 behind us and head on to week 7 in the NFL. But before we do that, it's Tuesday's show, which is where we recap the previous week's games before we get to Thursday's show, where we make our bold predictions, picks, players, props, all that good stuff for the following week. So, looking at what happened in week 6. Well, for starters, the Jets get whooped. And as of right now, 8 a.m. Tuesday morning, Adam Gase is still working in the NFL as a head coach. I think we have beaten this dead horse enough. I don't get it. I don't understand why. I don't know what they are doing in New York. But it is what it is. As for my other bold predictions, well, Terry McLaurin had a great game in terms of receiving yards. No touchdowns, though. And Madison just, wow. I'm stunned. I really am that he had as little of an impact as he did. I'm really wondering if the Vikings tried to change up the game plan a little bit with Cook being out. So really kind of only went 1 for 3 on our bold predictions. Also only went 1 for 3 last week with my show picks. And when we get into the individual games, I'll kind of talk about where things broke down there. But, with that being said, this is how the NFL is. If I got them right all the time, I wouldn't be doing a vlog. I'd be betting in Vegas and just relaxing with lots of money. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that week. However, speaking of lots of money, did manage to hit a really nice parlay this week. So nice little boost of cash there. Happy about that. But that's not what this show's about. Let's get to recapping week 6 in the NFL. We're going to start with Cincinnati versus the Indianapolis Colts. And why are we starting there? Well, if you're new to the show, we do 2 shows a week. Tuesday, we recap the previous week of NFL games, and Thursday, we give you our picks and predictions and game choices, players who we like, don't like, yada, yada, yada. But back in the very beginning of all this, I gave you a season forecast for what I thought was going to happen throughout the NFL season, and it was a little bit controversial where people told me I was crazy because my Super Bowl pick this year was the Indianapolis Colts. And although we are far from that actually coming to fruition, we did see a little bit of life this week, although against a at times hapless Cincinnati Bengals team. But, so what do we get out of this game? Well, A.J. Green absolutely bolstered his trade value in this game, as he showed that he can still play NFL football and can still be relied upon as a viable wide receiver in the NFL. Rivers potentially saved his starting job, as really the Bengals jumped out on the Colts in this one. They were really all over them to start the game. And Rivers did fight back and do what Rivers is known for, having a big game, although not the prettiest statistically. He definitely he's not the player that he was a few years ago. I think that is clear as day now. What I think this shows, though, really the theme of this game, the Colts come back and they win it. It keeps them on track to at least make the playoffs. But the Bengals D is a storyline out of this game. It really shows that is the biggest weakness for that team. And yeah, Joe Burrow, I think, has a bright future, and they have some great pieces there, and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd is still young, and Mixon and all that good stuff. But that defense is going to make it really tough for them to win games. So moving on to having to win games, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons versus the Minnesota Vikings. Now, here it appeared to be 2 teams that, although having rough seasons, were kind of at a crossroads in terms of what direction they were going. Minnesota, although they had lost to Seattle, it was a very, very close game. And it looked like maybe Minnesota was starting to get the train back on the rails. And Atlanta had just fired their coach and GM. They have looked absolutely horrible so far in 2020. The only good thing is, they got Julio Jones back this week, and Julio is back, and maybe because of Julio, but there is life in Atlanta. So whether it's the coaching change, whether it's getting Julio back, a combination of the two, man, did they come out, put up points like they did in the early stages of the season. And the fact of the matter was Minnesota could just not keep pace. And Kirk Cousins, damn, did he not try. He put up numbers. He put up some great numbers this week, although he threw for 3 INTs. So Minnesota, I think at this point is facing some really harsh realities. Their defense is not what it was. I think they are missing Danielle Hunter more than anybody realizes. And I think you're seeing how much he changes the face of that defense. They don't seem to have much of a pass rush, even with Ndakwe there. Their corners are young, and I understand they're in cap hell. And why are they in cap hell? Well, because they gave a ridiculous contract to Kirk Cousins, and they're going to basically live and die by that. And unfortunately, from coming from a team, the Washington football team, who got to see firsthand what Cousins is capable of, yeah, that's what you get. You're going to have weeks where he's going to put up amazing games, but more so, you're going to get very frustrated by him, and you're going to see these stinker games, so to speak. So what it means? Well, the Falcons are no longer winless. They are their first win. Minnesota has now dropped to 1-5. There's life back in Atlanta. I don't know really if it goes anywhere, but the good news is for fantasy, it looks like there's some blood flowing through Matt Ryan and those wide receivers, the people that we drafted. We're really hoping to have tremendous seasons. For Minnesota, you're still going to get fantasy points out of it. I just don't think they're capable of winning games. So hopefully you're not depending on that. So we had an unbeaten team fall. It took us to another game featuring an unbeaten, and that was the New York Giants versus my Washington football team. I'm embarrassed at this one. And I know the Washington fan base is very divided on this. And I understand both sides of it, but I'm going to mix the toxic Kool-Aid for you. So we'll see if you drink it or not. So the New York Giants were gifted their first win. And please come at me if you think anything otherwise. Giants fans, please try and explain to me why you weren't gifted your first win. The second half of that game, it was two bad teams playing through the first half. And in the second half of that game, for whatever reason, the adjustments Washington made and Jack Del Rio made, they absolutely put the brakes on the Giants offense. The Giants offense could not do anything in the second half. Washington comes back. Don't get me wrong, their defense is not real, or their offense isn't really doing anything either. But Washington starts to figure it out. They're driving the ball down the field. And we tie the game up. It's 13-13. Now, all we have to do is go ahead, drive the field, clock's kind of in our favor, score some more points because we've been doing that. All of a sudden, Kyle Allen looks like he's not complete hot garbage in the NFL, and we'll get to that in a second. But what happens? Strip sack, fumble, scoop, score. All of a sudden, the Giants are up 20-13. So, what happens on this? Well, guess what? The New York Giants defense is garbage. Basically, like they were playing two-hand touch out there. Washington drives the length of the field. And the one good thing that I will give to Kyle Allen, the one good thing, was he throws a beautiful touchdown pass to Cam Sims. As a Washington football team fan, I'm elated. I am thinking, wow, look, I'm not saying we're good. I'm not saying we're good at all. We're not. But I'm excited. I'm really excited because, let's face it, a win is a win. You want to win in the NFL. Nobody wants to lose. So I'm excited. I'm like, this is awesome. All right. Our defense has been smothering them. Let's kick the extra point. Let's tie this up. No. Riverboat Ron! I can officially say that I am now tired of the term Riverboat Ron. Okay. So let's talk about the last play. We go for 2. Now, everyone is absolutely right. If we convert, if we convert. Everyone thinks Ron Rivera is a genius. We are singing his praises. And the only reason we're pissed off right now as fan bases is because it was unsuccessful. Well, no duh. But let's talk about that. Okay. Why go for two in that situation? Well, Rivera says that he's playing to win. And the only way you can win is to win, to go after the win, to win. Okay. Well, you didn't win. Now, was this a test? Because I want to know if this was a test. Remember there was a 4th and goal play that basically led to Dwayne Haskins benching after he put a very good statistical performance up against the Baltimore Ravens. But he ultimately got benched because he had a 4th and goal play where he threw short of the line of scrimmage, basically threw it outside the end zone. We didn't score, turned the ball over. And Rivera said basically in that situation, he'd rather see the turnover. You're telling me this is not a double standard? Because apparently Kyle Allen has done enough to keep the job. You have to score 2 points to win the game. If not, you lose. And you throw the ball in the ground? But that's okay. Hey, that's all right. Why? Because Kyle Allen is Ron Rivera's boy. I think this sends a real clear message that Dwayne Haskins is not going to be in Washington. And all the lip service you get about he hasn't given up on Dwayne Haskins, blah, 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 blah. I think that's just to protect trade value, if there is any trade value for him. There is one thing that the Washington football team cannot do, and that is cannot trade players or get value in return for players at all. That is one thing I have seen. More than anything else, in the past 5 years, we cannot make a trade to save our lives. Gone are the days of us getting a player like Clinton Portis for Champ Bailey and actually getting some value in return. We should be happy if we get ham sandwiches for the guys. Am I frustrated as a fan? Yes, I'm very frustrated as a fan. I'm sorry, throughout that entire game, there is nothing that Allen showed me, the quarterback of the Washington football team, that makes me think that he is anything but a placeholder in the NFL. And if you want to tell me that he is better than Dwayne Haskins, I will sit there and I will tell you he is a liar. You are a liar. Look, Haskins is going to have his problems. He's only had 11 starts in the NFL. Allen and Rivera have now lost their last 9 games combined from this season and last season that Allen has started. But you're trying to win. Winning culture. We're going to win now. You know who else wants to have a winning culture and wants to win now? The Tennessee Titans. That takes us into our next game. The Houston Texans versus the Tennessee Titans. Now, I was surprised that this game scored as many points as it did. Although maybe not, because if there is the weak spot on these two teams, it is the defenses are a little suspect. But this game also went to, dare I say it, overtime. And this was a game, and you saw it in the coin flip. Both teams knew that whoever got the ball first, there was a very strong chance that was who's going to win the game, because the defense wasn't stopping anyone. They both had the offensive power to score. So when Tennessee scored a touchdown to tie the game, if they're trying to win, why didn't they go for 2? Because they know what the odds are. They saw what the game script was. They kicked the extra point, and they went to overtime, trying to win. What happens? Hand the ball to King Henry. Wow, did King Henry remind everybody whose kingdom the NFL is, and it is his. What a day. 200-plus yards, 2 touchdowns. He just made the Texans his bitchs. So, Houston should be selling. They should be selling everything at this point. We're going to talk through this show a lot about trades and the trade deadline coming up. Houston absolutely should be looking to unload every possible piece it can. There's a lot of teams that are looking for pass rush help, and I'm sorry. I know he is basically the face of your franchise and has been for whatever, but you have no draft capital. None. Your previous moron coach / GM, Mr. O'Brien, traded it all away. I'm sorry, but J.J. Watt should be on the trade block. He should be going somewhere, and you should be getting something back for him. As sad as it is for me to say this, I believe there is a team out there that would easily give you a first-round pick for J.J. Watt, even at the late stages in his career. So why aren't these moves being made? They should be. Another team that should be selling too, we just cover them, is the Washington football team and the New York Giants. You're not winning this year. If you have veterans on your team that are not going to be part of the long-term future of your franchise, you need to be getting draft capital back for them. Another player from the Texans that I would actually consider possibly moving, and again, this is where you need to have a GM, which you don't have a GM in place. You need to figure out what the long-term viability of this franchise is and how soon it's going to be that you're going to win now. Because if you're not going to win now, either this year, next year, or the year after, which I hate to tell you, I know you can change things pretty quick in the NFL. I don't see the Texans being that team that can win a Super Bowl in the next 3 years. I might be willing to dangle Deshaun Watson. Just saying. Think of the haul you could get back for a player like that. I know he's young, and I know that will probably gar the ire of other analysts and fans, but, sometimes it takes drastic moves. Remember when Dallas moved on from Herschel Walker? It propelled them to 3 Super Bowl wins. So, all right. So moving on. Yeah, Tennessee pulls that one out in overtime. We go to my lock of the week, which I got wrong. The New England Patriots versus the Denver Broncos. Denver is a beaten, wounded animal, and it makes me kind of wonder if there is such thing as a COVID hangover, because New England did not look great. They are starting to lose their shine from early in the season, and maybe it's because they're getting film now on Cam and the New England Patriots offense. I don't know, but Cam was pretty much held in check this week. Denver is missing a ton of defensive pieces, so you would have thought that this would have been an easy win for New England. Most people did. That wasn't the case. Denver came out. They played a pretty solid all-around game, even without Melvin Gordon. That does not surprise me at all. Lindsey is more than capable of filling those shoes. And the other player out of this game that I think you really need to keep your eye on is Tim Patrick. I think Tim Patrick is pretty safe to say a wide receiver 2 the rest of the way. I think you're easily going to get double-digit points from him every week. He's getting a ton of targets. He has become a favorite of not just Locke, but really all the quarterbacks in Denver. The guy runs crisp routes. He catches the ball. He's really a no-name player. He's been around a few years, but when he gets opportunities, man, does he produce. So keep that in mind if he is out there in your waiver wire right now and you're looking for some wide receiver help. That's the direction to go, to Tim Patrick. So moving on. I got that one wrong, by the way. Moving on to the Baltimore Ravens versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Like I said, somehow, some way, Philadelphia makes this game close. And they did. Even to the point where, Philly has the ball with, in the end of the game with potential to score a touchdown, a 2-point conversion, and tie it up. Didn't happen. But like I said, Philly makes the game close. I think part of the problem you are seeing with Philadelphia right now, despite just a ridiculous rash of injuries, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, is their linebacking crew and their offensive line just does not equate to what you need in the NFL. And really, in all honesty, the only thing going for them is the NFC East probably has the 4 worst offensive lines in football right now. It's really that bad. The good news for the Eagles is it's not that their offensive line is just flat garbage. It's just injuries. A ton of injuries have stacked up on their offensive line. So, and then again, we were talking about injuries for the Eagles. Well, the fact of the matter is they potentially now have lost their 2 best offensive weapons. Ertz is going to be out at least 3 to 4 weeks, and you're not going to have Miles Sanders this week. I don't know what the long-term prognosis is for him, but what you're starting to see is some injuries pile up for Miles Sanders now. This is a different injury. than what kept him out in the beginning of the year. Um, and I don't know if they were ever in on the Le'Veon Bell sweepstakes or not. But now you have to start to wonder at this point, should Philly have put a little bit more depth in that running back room? I don't know that. I know Boston Scott has shown flashes in the past, but I don't really know what they're relying on beyond him. So, and then in terms, really, all I'm going to talk about in terms for the Baltimore Ravens, you have seen this almost every week now. Um, for those of you who watch the show who are younger and maybe are a little bit more fair weather fans, if you don't know who Michael Vick is, or if you only know him for the trouble he got into, you need to YouTube Michael Vick highlights. Because basically what you are watching right now is Lamar Jackson is our generation's version of Michael Vick. And previous to that, before it was Michael Vick, it was Randall Cunningham. And really, my whole point on this isn't to compare them, but what it means is if you are playing the Baltimore Ravens, you must have a spy on Lamar Jackson at all times if you are going to beat this team. Plain and simple. You are playing with 10 defenders out there because one of your defender must be watching Lamar Jackson at all times. Because if you're not, if you don't have that player that is devoutly dedicated to keeping his two eyes plastered on Lamar Jackson and reacting to only what Lamar Jackson does, he's going to beat you. He's going to beat you every time. Man, he just carved the Eagles up. And look, he did it to Washington. He's done it to a bunch of teams. But Baltimore gets the win there. They're going in the right direction. Philly's going in the wrong direction, just like every other team in the East. So that is what it is. The exciting game of the week, featuring another game from the AFC North, what was supposed to be the exciting game of the week was supposed to be Pittsburgh versus Cleveland. All right, so let's talk about the true story of this game. I don't want to take anything away from the Pittsburgh Steelers because the Pittsburgh Steelers won that game pretty handily. But let's be realistic too. Your three best offensive weapons, 4 out of your top 5, come into this game injured. Baker Mayfield is hurting. OBJ is hurting. Not Lamar Landry. Jarvis Landry hurting. And then, of course, you're already missing Nick Chubb. You could just tell. Cleveland did not look right. They were off their game. And if you are going to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, you need to play a perfect game. You need to be 100% and ready to go. And Cleveland wasn't. They fell flat on their face. Like I said, I don't want to take anything away from Pittsburgh. I don't. They came out. They handily won that game. They had command of the game the entire time. And Cleveland just really did not have an answer for them. Chase Claypool came out, surprised me. I mean, he definitely did not put up his beast of a week as he did in week 5, but, came out, contributed again. And so did Washington. And Deontay Johnson didn't even suit up. And do you know who disappeared in that game? One, Juju Smith-Schuster really had no impact. It makes me wonder if, in all honesty, look, I've already made it known that I don't believe Juju remains on this team in 2021. So it begs the question, if you're Pittsburgh, do you maybe explore trading Juju? He really doesn't have a very big role with the team right now. He's not putting up any type of numbers. I guess it hinges more on the health of Deontay Johnson and how soon Deontay Johnson comes back. But, if you're not planning on keeping the guy in the offseason, again, this goes into the front office and the long-term plan. And guess what? Front offices and coaches have long-term plans. Do you try and get some draft capital back from him? I think you could get some pretty high draft capital for him. There's teams out there that are in desperate need of wide receivers. So I think that's pretty interesting. Injuries, unfortunately, are part of the game. We talked about Cleveland being beat up in this game and really not being able to do anything. Look, let's be clear. Baker Mayfield getting benched for Case Keenum had nothing to do with the fact of play. Baker Mayfield is still going to be the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, at least for now. And I don't see any reason why that doesn't stay throughout the entire season. Let's face it, before this game, they were 4-1. They're 4-2 now. They're not a bad team. They just lost. Baker Mayfield was beat up, and we knew that going into the game. And I think when that game got out of hand and Mayfield wasn't operating the way he should be, they pulled him, and rightfully so. But the Steelers take a very, very big hit on defense as they lose all their Pro Bowl linebacker in Bush. It's a shame. He is a stud of a player. He tore his ACL, so quick recovery to him, hopefully. But it'll be interesting to see if there's one thing the Steelers are known for, it's having depth at these positions. So I'm curious to see who the next man up is in Pittsburgh. Moving on to another game that I got wrong. And I think it's just that I need to stay away from this team. So Chicago versus Carolina. Chicago is now in first place in their division. They are 5-1. And it's Chicago's D. Chicago's D is winning games for this team. I'm sorry. Foles isn't. The running game isn't. I'm not the only person that says this. And I mean, let's face it, their competition hasn't been incredible. They haven't played any elite teams yet. But or at least they haven't won against any elite teams yet. I still have very, very little faith in the Chicago Bears. That's all I'm going to say. I'm definitely going to try and stay away from picking them because they seem to be helping them win. It seems if I pick them to lose, they win. Go figure. But that defense is scary good. And that's what Chicago's D has been for the past couple of years. Last year was a kind of anomaly. I think as fans and analysts and people who play fantasy, we all kind of were scratching our heads as to what happened to Chicago's D in 2019. So they seem to be back on track is really what it is. As for Carolina, Carolina got brought back to earth. Chicago's D kind of held them in check. But one thing I do have to note is Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson looks like a legit wide receiver one right now, and the pairing of him and Matt Rule may have been the best thing to ever happen for Robbie Anderson's career. If you don't know, Robbie Anderson played for Matt Rule in college, and you can see the relationship there. You can tell that Matt Rule trusts him. Robbie Anderson is not letting that trust down. So I think big things to come from Robbie Anderson. And I'll be honest, if you can get Robbie Anderson cheap, if you have people in your fantasy leagues that don't believe in him yet or think this is an anomaly, I would trade for him. I'd pick him up. I don't see this production going away. I think it's very clear that DJ Moore is the wide receiver 2 and really isn't even living up to being a wide receiver 2 on the team. But Robbie Anderson is just playing out of his mind right now and having an absolute career year. Talking to breakouts and moving on to breakouts, let's talk about Detroit versus Jacksonville. Now, this involves two coaches that absolutely, I believe, are on the hot seat, and it'll be interesting to see if they survive the year. We already talked a little bit about Adam Gase still having a job, which I don't get. But Matt Patricia, you definitely have saved your job for another week. But that's pretty easy against Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags are absolutely exactly the team that we thought they were, which just leads us back to scratching our head even more as to how the Colts lost to them in week 1, because they just have looked abysmal since then. Swift finally breaks out. And again, I'll be honest, if I'm a Swift owner, I'm trying to trade him after this point because I just don't think he's going to have this sustained success throughout the season. Maybe you can find somebody who wants to take a flyer on him. He's a big time boomer bust player at this point. There's so many mouths to feed in Detroit in the running game. Patricia comes from that New England mindset where there is no one bell cow back, so it's going to change from week to week. One week it's going to be Peterson that's going to steal 2 or 3 touchdowns in the goal line. It's fantasy madness, and it drives us crazy. And Jacksonville just breaks down, and that's really what it comes down to. They're just. I don't think the Jacksonville Jaguars are a strong NFL football team, and I didn't think that at the beginning of the year, and it's starting to show. So Detroit gets the win there. Moving on to coaches, we talked about coaches on the hot seat and how in God's name coaches don't have jobs. Let's talk about those New York Jets. Oh, get a migraine. Against the Miami Dolphins. Well, for starters, the Jets lost. The Jets were shut out. Miami put a whooping on them. And the interesting thing about this was um, Miami did nothing spectacular on offense. It wasn't, if you look at the box score, there was no like one player that jumps out at you. Gaskin, and Myles Gaskin had a good solid game. Yeah, a couple of the wide receivers caught touchdown passes, but it wasn't like Miami came in as this, force that you just weren't going to stop. It just shows how bad the Jets are. And I'm sorry, I looked at their schedule last night. I have a very hard time looking at the New York Jets schedule and wondering where they're going to get a win. They don't play teams like Atlanta. They don't play teams like Minnesota. They don't play Washington. They don't play the New York Giants. They don't play the Eagles or Dallas. Hate to put the entire NFC East in there, but that's the reality right now. There's 5 wins combined in the NFC East. I don't know. I have a very hard time predicting that the Jets get one win. I think they are destined for that number 1 pick, which is just going to create a whole lot of chaos. And I think they go 0-16, which is really a shame because I do not want to see Lawrence go to New York. I feel so horrible for that kid if he ends up as a Jet. Yeah, that's really all that can be said for that. It's too depressing to talk about that game anymore. So let's talk about a game where there is some happy. We will come back to that game, but that's in my final, or when we run out the clock. Not my final kneel down. When we run out the clock, we'll talk about that. So yeah, let's talk about a game that was a little bit more exciting, at least for one team. Let's talk about Green Bay versus Tampa Bay. Well, one thing became painfully obvious in this game: Green Bay cannot stop the run. And I think that's ultimately what is going to cost Green Bay games this year. Aaron Rodgers is playing out of his mind. He is having a career year. He is re-rejuvenated, re-energized, whatever you want to call it. But the fact of the matter is the opposing team has a damn good defense. Tom Brady made plays where he needed to make plays, and Rojo looked like a damn good NFL running back. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Tampa Bay came in and gave Green Bay their first loss. The other thing I think really gave Green Bay their first loss is there is absolutely a bro love going on between Rodgers and Davante Adams. Rodgers will stare down Davante Adams at times, and that's what cost him one of the pick sixes. And it happens, but it's just interesting to me that when Adams was out, it almost looked like Rodgers was a little bit more efficient. Where here it seemed to be that he was forcing the ball to Adams and really not getting it done. So it'll be an interesting thing to watch and develop. Moving on to the West Coast with the LA Rams and the San Francisco 49ers. I called this one. I actually called the one before, too. I said that Tampa Bay would beat Green Bay. And I felt that San Francisco would beat the Rams. Jimmy G sends a message to his critics. Wow. All the people that were, talking about the 49ers should trade for Matt Ryan and they need a different quarterback. It's not going to be Jimmy G. And look, the guy who was still dealing with a tender ankle last week, it's fine. He got pulled. It's funny. I think sometimes the media makes stories out of nothing. And we'll talk about that too. But Kittles makes it clear He's the top tight end in the league. But really what it came down to, I think, in this game was, look, San Francisco won the game. But I think really this loss kind of falls on Cooper Kupp. Kupp had a really off night. He dropped some passes, he missed some looks, and it might have been the difference in this one. It really might have. And in this division, which is just going to be a slobber knocker, they are going to beat up on each other throughout the year. You're talking probably, in all honesty, this may be the best division in football. This could be a tough loss for the Rams. It could come back to bite them. But all right, so San Francisco gets that win. You move on from it. But it looks like Jimmy G got healthy in this one. The wide receivers starting to come around. Had a Deebo Samuel type game. Brandon Ayuk had a great game. Like I said, Kittle is by far the best tight end in the league. Just it's about him staying healthy. So I got that one right too. Now, so I had three. I picked three games kind of afterwards that I thought would all, I guess, formidably be called upsets. And this was the third one, but we didn't get this one right. So Kansas City versus the Buffalo Bills. This is one of the Monday night games. Buffalo drops two in a row now. And I think really what kind of showed up in this game was Buffalo is really lacking a running game or an effective running game. And they really are lacking a pass rush. It's going to be really tough, in my opinion, to beat the Kansas City Chiefs without a really good pass rush. And I think you see this with all the great quarterbacks in the league. And I consider Patrick Mahomes great already. If you don't disrupt him, if you don't have pressure on him, he's going to beat you. He might be able to beat you even with the pressure, but if you don't have that, if you let him sit back there and do what he wants to do, it's just not going to be pretty. So I think that's an area that Buffalo really could, at the trade deadline here, potentially, come up with something in terms of, helping the team. If they're buying because they think this is their year, and I think Buffalo can make a lot of noise this year, I'd be looking for pass rushers. And like I said, J.J. Watt's one that's out there. If you're looking for linebackers, I know Washington potentially is going to have a pair of them for sale in Ryan Anderson, and as much as it pains me to say it, Ryan Kerrigan. If Kerrigan has to go to any team, I'd be okay with him going to Buffalo. I have friends, and my wife is also a Bills fan, so at least there's a little bit of love there still. Kerrigan's probably my favorite Washington player currently. So, but from the Kansas City side of things, well, Patrick Mahomes did Patrick Mahomes like he always does. But man, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has a statement game, an absolute statement game. And I want to talk about his stat line, but we're going to do that when I run out the clock, because there's one thing that I want to bring up that just lights a fire under my ass. And then the second Monday night game, Arizona versus Dallas. And wow, did I get this one wrong. Wow. Dallas's defense is horrible, but what might even be worse than Dallas's defense is their offensive line. The Cardinals lost their best pass rusher coming into this game. And every single play, Andy Dalton, it seemed like he had 4 or 5 Cardinals around him. Budda Baker, I think, came clean 3 or 4 times and lit him up. So, damn. Wow. They got smoked. The biggest storyline out of this game, beyond them getting smoked, Drake breaks out, finally has a great, week, which I think it's kind of easy to say at this point. If you need players to get healthy, a team for them to get healthy against is the Dallas Cowboys. But man, Drake had a big game. Surprisingly, a player who didn't have a big game was DeAndre Hopkins. The only salvage to his stat line was really late in the game, where he had 1 reception for a just crap ton of yards. He looked off, and that's the scary thing. If your best player on that team, and DeAndre Hopkins, I'm sorry, is still the best player offensively on that team, looks that off and you're whooping a team, that says a lot. He missed had a lot of targets, didn't get a lot of receptions out of it. Kyler Murray did Kyler Murray. And, the other thing that's really kind of interesting out of this game was Budda Baker. We talked about him coming clean. Budda Baker, interception, sacks. Honestly, he may be the best safety in the NFL right now. It really comes down to him and Minkah Fitzpatrick. But hands down, the two of them are probably the best safeties in the league right now. The interesting part from the Dallas side of this, besides the fact that the points they put up were garbage time points, really, there was no offense in this game, which is really scary for people who have Dallas Cowboys. But kind of what spelled really how this game turned out was Zeke, and he continues to have fumbling problems. I have not seen a running back have fumbling issues like this since Tiki Barber had his, horrible year for the New York Giants. And you kind of saw it a little bit last night, but I think honestly, as great as Zeke is, and I know he's their franchise running back, if they don't come up with a way to solve that, I think you're going to see Tony Pollard really start eating into Zeke's usage. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you're turning the ball over on a regular basis, you're going to lose your spot. And it's not like Tony Pollard is horrible. The other thing that Dallas needs to think about at this point, too, I know the NFC East is a winnable division, but you really have to take a hard look and wonder if you can do anything in this year. And if you can't, if I'm the Dallas Cowboys, I'm trading. I'm sellers. And here's my reasoning why. As of right now, the Dallas Cowboys have $20 million in cap space for next year. That does not include one Dak Prescott. Their offensive line is abysmal. Tyron Smith is spending yet another season plagued by injuries. Frederick retired. Like, that offensive line, which was vaunted and everyone loved the Dallas offensive line, that offensive line is gone. You're dealing with injuries left and right. You don't have the cogs that you did there. I would be looking to trade some of these players. I absolutely would be. I'd be getting these heavy contracts off. One of them, even though they just re-signed him this year, I'd be looking at maybe moving Amari Cooper. It's very obvious you have two very good, potentially above average, one maybe future elite wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. And you talk about the CeeDee Lamb draft pick, well, that was a luxury that you took because he fell to you. But what that does is it does make Cooper potentially expendable. And if you want to replace and you want to fix the defense and fix the offensive line, you're going to need cap space. And right now, I don't see that. I see a lot of high paid veterans that are pressing to meet the expectations of what they've done in the past. It's really interesting to see what Dallas is going to do, and really all the teams in the NFC East. It's an interesting dynamic here in 2020 with the division being as bad as it is. So, all right. So with that, it is time to run out the clock. And the first thing I'm going to talk about, I'm going to go right back to this Arizona-Dallas game because it happened, or I'm sorry, not Arizona-Dallas, Kansas City-Buffalo. Because it happened in the Kansas City-Buffalo game for me personally, but I know every single person can relate to this, whether it's fantasy, whether it's just you're a fan of the team. Penalties on scoring plays. Clyde Edwards-Helaire breaks off this wonderful touchdown run fairly early in the game. I'm a Clyde Edwards-Helaire owner. As a matter of fact, in this league, I barely lost this matchup. That probably would have been the difference. I would have won. But there's a flag on the field, and nothing makes me crazier. When there's an offensive holding play completely on the opposite side of the football field. I know I'm opening a can of worms when I say this, but in all honesty, officials, aren't you taking away from the game here? When somebody's holding and it has nothing to do with the play, let's face it, there's holding on every single play in the NFL. I watch the games back. I watch them from the multiple angles, and there is holding on every single play of the game. Half the time, you don't call it when it actually matters. Why are you calling holding when it has nothing to do with the play? when it's a tight end or an offensive tackle that's holding on the right side and the play is completely to the left side, or the holding occurs after the guy's 20 yards down the field. This happens. Tell me it doesn't. Tell me it doesn't happen. Tell me, every fan that watches this show, that you have not pulled your hair out over this. When that penalty flag flies, and you know it's coming back for something that had nothing to do with the actual outcome of the play. NFL, you want to make it more enjoyable for fans. You want to figure out how to do stuff. That's an area you need to fix. Because that drives us nuts. That pisses us off. You miss, and the referees do. The referees miss calls that matter. That actually, the guy's being held as he's trying to get to the quarterback, and he's 2 feet away and he's being held, and that doesn't get called. That's why people have these conspiracy theories that games are fixed and crap like that. That's why. Now, moving on to soapbox topic number 2 for running out the clock. Commentators. You guys are smarter than this, okay? For the most part, most commentators have either worked in this industry for years or they're former players. Why must you insist on living in the past? The big news this past week was Le'Veon Bell was let go from that dumpster fire of garbage, the pitiful excuse of a franchise, the New York Jets. Le'Veon Bell was released, sent into the wild. It's a free agent. Where would he go? So he goes to Kansas City. I don't knock the move. He's free. Hell, I was saying if Washington could get him, go get him. He's free. So he goes to Andy Reid. He goes to Eric Bieniemy, the running back whisperers, and everyone right away says, Le'Veon Bell there. Well, yeah, okay, it's not costing you anything. So, of course, it's a good move by Kansas City. But all of a sudden, commentators are talking like this is Le'Veon Bell from 3 years ago. Let's remember, this is a guy who sucked last year, sat out the year before that, and the year before that, that's when he did something. Now, don't get me wrong, players leave Adam Gase and they do exponentially better. But you're talking like he is still a top 3 running back in the NFL, and now just because he's in Kansas City, you have no clue. You don't know what you're getting. You have a guy who sat for a year. You have a guy who has been malcontent everywhere he goes anymore. He wants more money. So how long, my question is, how long before that potentially pops up? No, everyone just keeps talking about how the rich keep getting richer, and maybe they do. Maybe it does end up being a great signing for the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not knocking the Chiefs on this. I just don't get why commentators constantly live in the past. All of a sudden, though, I honestly feel like they're Dan Snyder. They're Dan Snyder of the Washington football team. Back when he was signing players like Bruce Smith and Deion Sanders, and we're going to the Super Bowl. That's right. They haven't been good for 5 years. They're on the decline of their career. Guess what? Le'Veon Bell is plus 30. We all know what happens to plus 30 running backs. They're not the same. I'm not saying he's bad. He's a hell of a lot better than I would be out there. He's a hell of a lot better than probably most of the running backs in the NFL. But stop acting like this is the greatest thing to ever happen to a team and, it's unfair. And look, if Le'Veon Bell was this damn good, here's how I'll beat your argument. If he was this damn good, if he was such a clear cut, he was going to make your team into an unstoppable force, somebody would have traded at least a 7th round pick for him. On to our final kneel down. A lot of times during running out the clock, I bitch and I complain I'm on my soapbox. I'm not going to do that for this one. And actually, this is something that gave me the tingles a little bit for the NFL. So, in the Miami-New York Jets game, at the end of the game, because the Jets suck so bad and we're getting blown out, Tua Tagovailoa, I can't say his last name right. Tua came into the game to throw his first NFL pass. That's great. That's awesome. This guy's the future of the Miami Dolphins. But if you haven't gotten the chance to see it through social media or you didn't catch it anywhere, what's really unique about this and what I think really deserves to be mentioned and cool, because his parents couldn't be there, Tua goes back out on the field in full uniform after the game. There's photos that have surfaced that basically it looks like he is in a ghost town. He is sitting on the 15-yard line of the field by himself, and he FaceTimes his parents. And he just sits there and takes it all in. Now, he had a hip injury that had a lot of people questioning whether or not he'd even ever play in the NFL. And sometimes I rant and I talk about these people, these athletes being overpaid babies because they whine and complain about the stupidest crap. It's so refreshing to see somebody who understands the gravity of the moment, that understands how fortunate he is to have this opportunity and be able to reflect on it. That was cool to see. Not a Miami Dolphins fan, but that was cool to see a young player take that moment to just sit and reflect of the opportunity that's in front of him and what's been given to him. So I became a Tua fan for that moment. So that's our show. I hope you guys liked it. If you do like it, don't forget, click the subscribe button down below if you haven't already. Make sure you follow us so you don't miss any shows. And don't forget to share and tell your friends about the show. We're going to be back on Thursday with our player, who we like, don't like, picks, predictions. And of course, some more crazy thoughts from me when we run out the clock. For Mark D, this is the First and 10 Club. Let's go football.